Dear students, today's topic is transport of carbon dioxide. As we have discussed in oxygen, before we start discussion of carbon dioxide, let us discuss the diffusion of carbon dioxide from peripheral tissues into capillaries. Now, in the capillaries, the arterial blood is reaching, having PCO2 of 40 millimeter of mercury. You can see in the diagram, inside the cell, the average PCO2 is 46 millimeter of mercury. Between the capillary and the cell, there is an interstitial fluid. It is having PCO2 of 45 millimeter of mercury. Now, if you will compare with the oxygen, here the gradient is very less. Only 1 mmHg gradient between cell and interstitium, and only 5 mmHg gradient between interstitium and capillary blood. But this is enough. Why? Because carbon dioxide is 20 times more diffusible than oxygen, as we have discussed in the diffusion lecture. So ultimately, the carbon dioxide will diffuse from the cell into interstitium, and from the interstitium into the capillaries, and so the PCO2 of the venous blood leaving the capillaries will become 45 millimeter of mercury. Now let us discuss diffusion of the carbon dioxide at lungs level. Now the deoxygenated blood is carrying carbon dioxide with PCO2 of 45 millimeter of mercury. Once this blood reaches to the pulmonary capillary, there will be exchange of carbon dioxide between blood and air. So carbon dioxide from the pulmonary capillary blood will diffuse out into alveolar air. Alveolar air PCO2 is 40 millimeter of mercury. So there is a 5 mmHg gradient. Now see the below graph. Just like oxygen, here within total 1/3 of the length of the capillary, the equilibrium has been achieved. So we have 2/3 reserve in exercise time. So when person is doing heavy exercise and producing so much quantities of the carbon dioxide, even though we can remove this carbon dioxide because we have 2/3 of the reserve. You can see in the diagram, the equilibrium is achieved once the blood passes through only 1/3 of the length of the pulmonary capillary. Now this graph is showing relationship between effect of rate of tissue metabolism and tissue blood flow on interstitial PCO2. On x-axis we have blood flow, on y-axis we have PCO2. You can see once the blood flow increases, PCO2 always decreases due to washout of carbon dioxide by excessive flow of the blood. Conversely, you can also see whenever the blood flow decreases, PCO2 level increases due to accumulation of carbon dioxide. Now here there are three curves visible. The middle dark curve is normal curve during normal tissue metabolism. You can see there are 2 points visible. A is the normal operating point with normal 100% of the blood flow with PCO2 of 45 millimeter of mercury. When blood flow decreases at the point B, the PCO2 is increasing. Now there are two dotted curves. The lower dotted curve is during 1/4 of the normal metabolism. So when metabolism is 1/4 of the normal, then obviously less amount of the carbon dioxide will be produced. So PCO2 level will decrease. Conversely, the upper dotted curve is showing 10 times the normal metabolism. So whenever the metabolism is fast, CO2 production will be more, and therefore the PCO2 level is more. Now after clearing the diffusion part, let us discuss our main today's part, that is transport of carbon dioxide in the blood. Under resting conditions, an average of 4 milliliters of carbon dioxide is transported from tissues to the lungs in each 100 ml of blood. Now, if we look into the distribution of this 4 ml, you can see there are three ways by which carbon dioxide is transported in the blood. In the dissolved state, only 7% or 0.3 ml out of total 4 ml. So very less amount of the carbon dioxide is transported in dissolved form. Remember, in the oxygen, in the dissolved form it was 3%. Now the main form is in the form of bicarbonate ion. It contributes 70% of the total transport, or 2.5 ml out of total 4 ml of carbon dioxide transport in each 100 ml of blood. And the third is in combination with hemoglobin and plasma proteins. This is also known as carbamino compounds. Here the carbon dioxide is reacting with amine part of hemoglobin or plasma proteins. Out of these two, hemoglobin will contribute more. Total contribution by both together is around 23% or 1.5 ml out of total 4 ml of the transport. Now this diagram is showing the details of carbon dioxide transport in all the three ways. On the right side, you can see one cell is shown having production of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide from the cell will diffuse into interstitial fluid. Ultimately, it will enter into capillary. In the capillary, there is plasma as well as RBCs. Initially, the carbon dioxide enters into plasma and from there it will diffuse into RBC. Now inside the RBC you can see either it will react with the hemoglobin or with the water. When it reacts with the hemoglobin, it will produce carbaminohemoglobin and it will also contribute to transport of carbon dioxide. When the carbon dioxide reacts with the water, there is a crucial enzyme present in the RBC. It will make this reaction very fast, very rapid. So there will be production of carbonic acid, H2CO3. This carbonic acid will dissociate into HCO3 minus and H plus. Now this HCO3 minus bicarbonate ion will diffuse out from RBC into the plasma, and in exchange of that, chloride will diffuse in from the plasma into the RBC. Actually, there is a special carrier protein which is doing movement of these two ions in opposite direction. You can also see water is following chloride due to osmosis. So water is entering inside the RBC. Now the H plus ion which was formed due to dissociation of carbonic acid will combine with hemoglobin. So this diagram is showing transport of carbon dioxide as a bicarbonate ion in the plasma, as a carbamino compounds like hemoglobin as well as plasma proteins, and in dissolved form in the plasma. Remember the contribution. In the dissolved form it is 7%, in the carbamino compounds it is 23%, and in the form of bicarbonate maximum 70%. This is a very important Viva question, chloride shift. Another name is Hamburger's phenomenon. As we have shown in that last diagram, a special bicarbonate chloride carrier protein is present on the RBC membrane, which causes diffusion of the bicarbonate ion out and chloride ion in. So what happens? The chloride content of the venous blood is more than the chloride content of arterial blood. And we have seen in the diagram, water is following the chloride due to simultaneous osmosis. Due to more water content, obviously the hematocrit value or the PCV value will rise. So you can say that hematocrit value of venous blood is slightly more than hematocrit value of arterial blood. So in general, movement of the bicarbonate ion out and movement of the chloride ion in due to special carrier protein is called chloride shift. Now, like in the case of oxygen, we also have a dissociation curve for carbon dioxide. You can see on the x-axis we have PCO2 in millimeter of mercury. On the y-axis we have volume percentage of carbon dioxide in the blood. You can see the shape of the curve also. Now we all know in the arterial blood the PCO2 is 40 and in the venous blood the PCO2 is 45 mmHg. If you will trace 40 and 45 from the x-axis and if you will look in the y-axis, you can find the volume percentage is 48 percentage at 40 mmHg point and it is 52 percentage at 45 mmHg point. So there is a difference of 4 volume percentage, 52 minus 48. So 4 ml of the carbon dioxide is transported in each 100 ml of the blood in resting conditions. In oxygen transport, we had discussed Bohr's effect. Similarly, we have Halden's effect in carbon dioxide transport. It is exactly opposite to Bohr's effect. In Bohr's effect, the loading of the blood with carbon dioxide was causing unloading of oxygen. Here, loading of the blood with oxygen is causing unloading of carbon dioxide. Now, this effect is more important than Bohr's effect because it almost doubles the amount of the carbon dioxide released from the blood in the lungs. Now, what is the reason? The reason is that when oxygen comes, it will combine with the hemoglobin. There will be production of oxyhemoglobin. It is more acidic and it has less tendency for carbon dioxide. So due to more entry of oxygen, there is more exit of carbon dioxide. So remember this Halden's effect. Now this diagram is showing importance of Halden's effect. On the x-axis we have PCO2 level. On the y-axis we have volume percentage of carbon dioxide in the blood. Now you can see two curves, dotted curve and bold curve. Now there are 2 points shown A and B. So what happens in the tissue capillaries is, in the tissue capillaries we have PCO2 of 45 millimeter of mercury. Trace the point A. If you will see the point A and trace it on the y-axis, there is 52 volume percentage of carbon dioxide in tissue capillaries. Now when you will come down, it will decrease, but at the lungs level what happens, PO2 level is now more. Initially at the tissue level the PO2 was 40 millimeter of mercury, but at the alveoli PO2 is more, it is about 100 millimeter of mercury, and therefore the point is now shifted from A to the B. So due to rise in the oxygen level, more amount of the carbon dioxide is diffused. So if you will trace volume percentage, it is around 48 volume percentage and PCO2 will become 40 millimeter of mercury. See the point B. Suppose if the oxygen level is not rising, it is remaining the same 40 millimeter of mercury, then this 52 will become only 50. It will not become 48. So out of total 4 ml, only 2 ml or 2 volume percentage transport is possible without rise in oxygen. So you can say that Halden's effect is doubling the total amount of transport of carbon dioxide. With Halden's effect, we can transport 4 ml of carbon dioxide in 100 ml of the blood, and without Halden's effect, we can only transport 2 ml of the carbon dioxide in 100 ml of the blood. Now, after finishing the oxygen and carbon dioxide transport, we must discuss a term, respiratory exchange ratio. It is the ratio of carbon dioxide output to oxygen uptake. Now we know that the carbon dioxide output is 4 ml in 100 ml of the blood, and oxygen uptake is 5 ml in 100 ml of the blood. So 4 divided by 5, so it will give you the value of 0.825. This is the average value of respiratory exchange ratio, and this is in a person with balanced diet having enough quantities of carbon dioxide, proteins and fat. Now suppose if a person is exclusively taking carbohydrates only, then this respiratory exchange ratio will become 1. Why? Because for every O2 molecule, one CO2 molecule is produced at cellular level. Then if the person is on exclusive fat diet, the ratio is only 0.7. Now what is the reason? The reason is that here most of the oxygen is used to combine with hydrogen atoms from the fat to form water instead of carbon dioxide. So ratio will decrease because now less carbon dioxide is produced and more oxygen is consumed. So it will become 0.7. So it was all about transport of carbon dioxide. Thank you.